Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is brought to you by Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery community, a thriving network of individuals who are fighting back against the stigma of addiction and recovery. Join your hosts, Mike the Podfather and Jersey Ed, as they break the silence and speak up about the real issues of addiction, treatment, and recovery. Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your Friends in Recovery.
Hey everybody, welcome to friendsandrecoverypodcast.com. I am the Podfather.
And I'm Jersey Ed.
Hey, how are you, Ed?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again, too.
You're looking well.
Maybe.
Yeah, well.
I got a new shirt.
Yes,
Christmas.
nice.
Got it for Christmas.
Very nice.
Everybody complains about my pink shirts.
Very
I wear all the
stylish.
time. Go fuck yourself. So.
Right off the bat.
That's right.
Right off
get
the
it.
bat.
Listen, Maegan Kenney sitting next to me. She put up. I listened to a couple of podcasts. I'll introduce who she is. But let me tell you, you drop some F-bombs on that show.
I do.
It's
I can't help
crazy.
it. I can't help it. I cannot help it. It all just comes out free flowing, and that's the word.
So Friends in Recovery is very calm compared to your podcast, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm doing good, Mike. How about you?
Doing well.
Good. What's
So far, it's been a
new?
good
What's
year.
going? Yeah.
Things are good. Staying busy.
Yeah.
Family's good. Everybody's good.
That's good.
Sobriety's good.
Sobriety is always good,
Yep.
man.
Yep.
Sobriety is always good. So it's why we're living, I guess.
That's why we're living.
Yep. And you can attest to that, right, Megan?
Absolutely. Gratitude all day. Just read an article the other day on how gratitude is rewiring the brain to sort of set people up for success. So that's it right there.
Attitude of gratitude.
That's
Yep.
it. That's it. Let's get some business done first here, if you guys don't mind. We want to, of course, thank Genesis House for this lovely, sweet studio. Oh, Sweets, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Did you say anything?
Thank you for forgetting about me.
That's
I
right.
appreciate
We always
that.
forget about you. How you doing, Sweets?
I'm doing fantastic. I had a rough morning getting out of bed, but I have an attitude of gratitude. So
Well,
see what
looks
happens.
like your hair is all messed
We'll
up.
see what happens. Yeah.
We just want to thank Genesis House for this beautiful, sweet studio here. In addition, Friends in Recovery Podcast will hold community events around the country. Voorhees, New Jersey, Palm Springs, Florida, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota is new. We just added that on. Lowell, Massachusetts.
That's up and running.
That's up and running.
Up and running.
Okay.
Started New Year's Day. Bob Cox put that together, and it's called 6 o'clock Serenity.
6 o'clock. Oh, he changed the name?
Yep.
Okay. So the Friends in Recovery meeting isn't there yet, but we'll have to get that going.
Correct.
And then Newtown, Connecticut also is another Friends in Recovery meeting. And for you guys who don't know what Friends in Recovery meeting is, and Megan, I'll explain it to you. Mm-hmm. We started at Genesis House. We started Friends in Recovery. Our alumni from around the country. We want them to get together and kind of do a monthly meeting. But it's not just for alumni. It's all Friends in Recovery. So we encourage people to bring, people who are sober, that want to get sober. They come to these meetings. Of course, Genesis House sponsors it. And the meetings are growing. We're in 5 or 6 different states now. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's awesome. Great way to bring people together too after the fact as well.
Absolutely.
Sort of bridge the two sides. You know?
Yeah. And it's working well. I mean, most of them, most of the meetings are either at an outpatient facility, or somewhere where it's connected to recovery, which helps to everybody too.
And it's important to mention also that a lot of the people that put these meetings together, like Bob Cox, he's an alumnus of Genesis House.
Yeah, and Melissa and
2 years
Stacy
sober,
putting all these together, and Skylar we can't forget too. So thank you girls for doing all that. Also, we are powered by your likes, follows, subscribes, and shares. Follow us on social media and help us get the word out. And leave us a review. Remember, 5-star review. That's what we need, right? Isn't that what we need?
All 5.
All 5.
That's
yes. Isn't that you're a podcaster?
That's
right?
the commodity.
Is that what you want?
You want the 5 stars.
Oh,
yes.
so I gave your show 1 star. Was that bad?
And instead of giving us
a bit.
instead of giving 4, send an email and tell us what we need to do to get 5.
Exactly. Yeah. And remember, we're always looking for speakers and your story, out there. Like Megan's story, who we're going to hear in a minute. Maybe not a minute, but we'll figure it out how long it's going to be.
Oh, sure.
Don't hold me to a minute.
I will.
So Jersey Ed's podcast pick of the week, and that's going to be the Addictionary Podcast.
Woo, baby.
Are you familiar? Are you familiar with that? Well, here, let me tell you about it, Megan. So, host Maegan and Bobby Kennedy.
Kenney.
Kenny.
Although I'll take Kennedy.
Yeah,
hey,
I'll take
I'm
Kennedy's
looking for
money.
elevation here.
Let's start that over. All right, host Maegan and Bobby Kenney. It's a real life talk. Father and daughter, kind of in recovery. That's what you guys are, right? And you get guests that are in the field, and you kind of ramble on about a little bit about life. I like your podcast because it's not about recovery all the time. It's about your dad's a movie star or whatever he does.
So he thinks.
It's okay. Let
local celebrity. It's all right.
Local celebrity. But you guys talk about like a lot of just stuff like, recovery for me, and I know Sweets and you, Mike, or Podfather, it's not about talking recovery 24/7.
Right.
It's about talking about the good stuff that life brings us or the bad stuff, how we can deal with it without using drugs or alcohol. So that's what I like about your show, and that's kind of what we do on our show. I'm like, this woman, I think she copied our show. And we are coming up on 2 years, actually,
really?
in February.
Oh,
yeah.
my gosh,
yeah, so you guys
congratulations.
just came up on 2 years.
Yep.
And we're on 2 years, too. For Friends in Recovery, I think we're about 6 months into the other show. What's our other show?
Friends in Recovery, Answering the Call.
So, so I've been listening to it, and there's another one I listened to. Did I tell you Sober Pod?
You did, yeah.
Yeah, Sober Pod. You ever listen
I'll have to check that out.
Oh, it's my favorite. It really is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is it local?
No, I think they're in California.
Okay.
So
Is that the one that was making fun of our accents?
yeah. So the first episode of the year, they were, I don't know, whatever, and I guess somehow they heard us. And we were talking about them on our show for their podcast Pick of the Week, and they were trying to like make a Boston accent and a Jersey accent.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
it was funny.
Well, they did the 12 steps over 12 months.
Yes, that was
and
cool.
then you guys commented on step 11, and
yes.
so I listened to the one when you sent it, and they hacked the accent too. It was bad. Apparently, they didn't pick up on the Boston.
No, they were just working
maybe
on
did I not talk that day or something?
I don't know, man. I don't know, but they're pretty good. And that show is it's really cool because it's an agnostic, atheist, and a believer. There's three of them. So they have every radical view from each point, and it all brings it all together because it's all recovery. You know? It's pretty cool. So,
that's great.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites, too. So yours and Sober Pod. But, of course, Friends in Recovery is my favorite.
We hope so.
I love it.
So anyways.
You are fickle.
I am. So what else? Do you have anything for us, Mike? Back to you in the studio, Mike.
I have nothing at all. I'm really dying to hear Maegan about her podcast and her dad. Sounds like an interesting.
It is. It's fun. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So, like you said, we started it about 2 years ago. And I think for me, sort of being 7.5 years recovered, but only sort of a year in deciding that I was going to go back to school and get a master's degree in counseling, realizing that like I had these two perspectives that I really wanted to share. So I had this real life sort of nitty gritty, hard knocks kind of experience with my drug addiction and what I was exposed to with my dad's addiction, how I was raised and what I was raised around. And then sort of coming out on the other side and gaining all of this clinical expertise on how to help people that are in my position, but also how to do a little bit more with it, really from that public policy and advocacy level, which is what I get into a lot now in speaking engagements and that sort of thing. But like really how to like move the conversation from a global perspective on helping people see the nuances of addiction and recovery and change sort of what the face looks like. And that really all comes down to stigma, because really what is the face of addiction anyway? Yeah. But I think for me, it's really been able to shake some stuff up and kind of turn some theories on its head and then bring all of that together on this podcast that I share with my dad, where it's like, you know, here I am sharing my clinical experience and he's talking about his life as, you know, a drug dealer and getting caught and the house getting bugged and me being a kid and being exposed to all this. So it's like, you know, his life is a movie in and of itself. Forget the fact that he actually, you know, does this stuff on screen. And then we bridge that with, you know, my professionalism. So it's a lot of me kind of giving feedback to him and providing my vantage point from a different place now. So
I like what you just said about the stigma. You know, being an addict or an alcoholic, you know, in recovery, there is a huge stigma. And I think people are very uncomfortable sometimes. Not so much the addict or the alcoholic. I think the longer you're sober, the more you realize how fortunate, you know, that it's a gift. It's a gift to be sober. It's not something we're entitled to. It's actually a gift. And, you know, we can lose it any day. That's why it's one day at a time. Yep. But society in general, I think, is finally starting to catch on. This opioid epidemic that we've all been living through the last 12 years or so, especially the last 4 or 5 years, I think has really awoken a lot of people.
I agree.
Well, the numbers, the Bill Farrell show, the corrections officer that we had, Bill.
Right. Great guy.
Yeah, I had a blast with him. He was
Yeah,
good.
I think he was using stadiums.
Yes.
Stadium-size amounts of people
That was
per year.
crazy. So
to talk about the death toll.
2018, 72,000 people died of overdoses. Gillette Stadium up here in New England holds 67,000 people. So imagine, I was talking to a cop yesterday, and he said, and I gave him that statistic. He goes, think about it. He goes, Sunday, you fill that stadium up, and people on the outside, Monday, they're all gone. That's fucking insane.
Right.
And that's in 1 year.
Right. In my own personal life, I have five close friends, all in law enforcement. 5 of them that lost their sons in 2 years. So that statistic alone, I mean, how many close friends do we actually have? And every one of them was in law enforcement. Every one of them was either a police officer or a correctional officer, and they all had sons that died before they were 32 years old.
Wow.
They're horrible.
It's insane. It's just we have to do something about it. And I was with a bunch of cops yesterday, and they're in the recovery field also, and he was saying that it's going to be a slow process. That stadium isn't going to kind of empty out anytime soon.
Right.
And I just don't see no end in it. I mean, you're a very smart person from your show. I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to this woman, but I mean, what and you're studying and you're doing you're working with Arden and all that. But what's your take on that? What do you think about the
how to curb this?
Yeah.
How to curb the death toll? I think it's a slow moving process. I think we can throw a ton, billions of dollars at it. I still don't think we're going to find the solution. I think as the problem gets worse and as we find ways to make it better, we get more complicated with it. So I'm actually flying out to Dallas on January 23rd at the American College of Emergency Room Physicians to speak on a panel about stigma specifically in the emergency room. And they want to hear really out-of-the-box, innovative solutions about how we can attack this. I think the stigma has a big role in this. And then I'm also just sort of experiencing through myself and my own experience of the truth that I live, of the stigma that we face within the recovery community itself with trying to come up with solutions. What's the right solution in terms of medications? How long should people be on them? There's all sorts of ways in which people are uncomfortable with the solutions that people are trying to come up with, but people are desperate to find them. So I think it's going to have to work itself out. And I think we're starting in the right place by limiting, the ways in which we've overprescribed the opioids, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
I really believe that when you look at generations, and a good rule of thumb for me is I look at cigarette smoking. I grew up in a household where people smoke cigarettes. I started smoking cigarettes at a young age. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. My point is,
what do you smoke?
Cigars. But my point is, generationally, this will change, but it's not going to happen in our lifetime. Not mine anyway. I'm 65. I really don't see it happening that way. But I think eventually it is going to curb itself, but not in this generation. I really believe that people have to be educated. They have to have lived life experiences, their own life experience, and get to a place where, they've lived through it. They had uncles and aunts and cousins and friends that died, and now that's not happening anymore. But I think maybe 20 years from now we'll see a difference.
Well, we have to look back in the 80s when it was cocaine and crack, when crack got really bad. I mean, I remember New York City just driving in through the Lincoln Tunnel and going past the Greyhound buildings. There was a reason why I went past the Greyhound buildings, but it's where I bought all my cocaine at. But just guys just strung out from crack and living under in the subways, and it was horrible back then, and I didn't think there was any end in sight for that, but there was, but the unfortunate thing was the opiates came in and took over from there.
Look at San Francisco. I mean, you just watch the nightly news. It's disheartening. Imagine owning a business in San Francisco and having people living right outside your door, defecating, urinating, vomiting, just shooting up and dying, and society. I mean, the legal system out there and the political system out there. Their hands are tied. They're doing the best they can. It's a very liberal area, and it's just not getting any better.
Well, like you said, it's going to take some money, Maegan, and I don't think money's the answer, though.
No.
I mean, education. I think, Sweets, you were talking about something on one of our last shows about smoking. Did you have that statistic?
Well, what it was is with the generational decline, where they used the Truth Campaign.
Yes.
And, they were able to, instead of appealing to like the, when you put a commercial up and it's a 70-year-old woman with a hole in her throat in a wheelchair talking about how you're going to die, that doesn't do anything for a 16-year-old kid that wants to pick up cigarettes because they're immortal. That's never going to happen to them. They're different. And that's also 100 million years from now. So it's not real. And so the Truth Campaign brought it down to what was real to them at the moment, by talking about you'll have bad breath. You won't have money to buy video games. You'll have to step out of like the prom. You won't be able to dance. You have to take breaks during your your band performance or whatever it might be. So the Truth Campaign was able to, in addition to other resources, they were able to get it down, I think at one point before vaping got big, like somewhere between 4% and 7%.
That's crazy.
With the next generation bringing in cigarettes. And so there's, obviously something there, making it real, bringing it to the people for right now. I doubt it's a fear campaign.
Right.
But it might have to be, approaching people where they're at and kind of looking at society where they are today and how to talk to people today about today's problems.
Well, I think we're also in the recovering field, in the, in the treatment field, we're also pushing MAT. I'm not a fan of it. I mean, I'm old school AA and the story abstinence. That's it. But I think we need to look at recovery in a different way, not just abstinence. I mean, because some people, there's not a like cancer treatment isn't all done one way like AA is done or NA is done. So I think we have to look at it that way also, and just take, not that I'm giving anybody their green light to go ahead and use, but I think that we have to look at recovery differently than we did when I got sober, when Mike got sober, even from when you got sober, Sweets. I'm not sure how long you've been around, but
7.5 years. So
there's a huge change in 7.5 years too.
Huge change, and that's and so from my perspective of being a clinician in the field and sort of immersing myself into the topics of trauma and sort of healing the inner child and consciousness work and meditation and all the stuff that I've been working on, I really do see the need for us to get in front of this. And I think if we use the same model and apply it to everybody the way we always have, when we know what the science tells us about epigenetics and about how people's DNA change when they get exposed to trauma or just whatever environmental factors are there, we just can't approach everybody the same way. I think on a biochemical level, on a cellular level, we're just way too different. I mean, what's going to cure one person is going to kill somebody else, and that's just the way it goes.
What I have seen changes in is I had an opportunity to be the employee assistance professional for the Middlesex County Sheriff's Department, working with correctional officers and their family members.
He had your dad up in Bill Ricca.
Oh,
and I also was a correctional officer back in the 70s when I got out of the Army. But what I see now,
so he told you.
so they know each other.
I knew your dad. He was in PC.
I'm sure he was.
No, I'm just kidding. But there's a sheriff. His name is Peter Katusian, and I can honestly say that he's breathed a lot of fresh ideas, very fresh ideas, in going at inmates that normally, I mean, 90% of the people in prison are there because of booze and drugs. I mean, there's no question about it. That's what it's about. He's taken the initiative to put these programs together to work with inmates to help them with their addiction. And no one's ever done this. Before you got locked up, you just did your time. And when I worked there, you did anyway. I mean, you had a little stinger. You could make coffee. You walked around. You wore an orange suit, and then you got out.
That's how I did time.
Right, exactly. And now he has classes. He has people coming in, professionals speaking about addiction, giving them alternatives, giving them an aftercare program when they get out. And these are
key.
This is part of the chain of humanity and society getting together and helping on this level anyway. And so the recidivism has gone down in many ways because of this. And I just believe like little changes like that is what we need. But you have to get the whole community involved. It can't just be corrections or police. It has to be everybody.
No, and you can't arrest people. And, I mean, the big drug dealers, you have to go after those guys. They're the fucking scumbags that are bringing all this shit in. But we also have to go after other countries that are supporting all this and bringing all this in. We have to figure out, we can't just go after the little guy who's dealing a couple bags of heroin here or there. Obviously, we do you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law. But we got to educate them. We got to rehabilitate them and get them going. But there's a bigger level. Where's that guy getting it from? Where's it all coming from?
Right.
What's going on? How do we stop it? I mean, everybody's going to find a way to get it in somehow, some way. But I don't think we're doing enough. Maybe on the borders, and I don't want to get into that, Mike.
You're the one talking about it, Ed, not me.
But
don't get political on me. Ed.
Don't get political. I won't go that way.
I think we're going to need to take a break here, guys. You guys are
Friends in Recovery Podcast. We'll be back.
All right.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. At Genesis House, they focus on treating the underlying causes of addiction. Their comprehensive approach includes psychiatric care, individual and small group therapy, trauma healing techniques, and holistic care including yoga, massage, and animal-assisted therapy. After treatment, their clients enjoy the lifelong support of a nationwide network of Genesis House alumni. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Friends in Recovery Podcast.com. I am the Podfather.
I'm Jersey Ed, and we have Maegan Kenney.
That's right. You
Not
got it.
Kennedy. Maegan Kenney.
Kenny it is.
That's it. Well, before the break, I don't even know what we were talking about. I was trying to get Mike to get political so he can get in trouble, but that was stopped by Sweets really quick.
Quick production edit, real-time edit.
So anyways, we're here with Maegan Kenney from the Addictionary Podcast,
Right.
Which is one of my top 5 favorites.
Love it.
And
Podcast pick of the week.
Podcast pick of the week this week. Yes, absolutely. And all this wonderful graphics will come up and
dazzle you.
Yes, that's amazing. So, Mike. Anyways, so Mike, you were talking about what were you guys talking in between?
We were
the
talking
break?
about some of the methods they're using now in prison to help people that are, doing time that are probably there because of the direct result in use and abuse of alcohol and drugs. And Maegan had brought up some good points about medication and such. But Maegan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your own story, about your recovery?
Yeah.
And,
It's not all about us on
where
this
you
show.
are today.
So totally. No, I love it. And I think this is sort of where a lot of my passion lies, too, because since coming out about my story, I've connected with so many different people and folks in the field, and particularly the makers of the medication Vivitrol, which played such an instrumental role in my recovery. So I think, as we were talking in the break about, like, how much work do you put in, whatever path you're going to take, whatever medication you're going to use, if any, to help yourself, how can you make that medication work for you, and how you can make the most of that medication. And I think for me, what I talk about when I talk about the Vivitrol is because it gave me the blocker that I needed to not use the opioids, which was the drug of choice.
Right.
It was the drug that took me to my knees. And I desperately wanted to stop. It wasn't a matter of whether or not I wanted something better. It was just I didn't know how to break the daily habitual routine of waking up, not knowing what to do without calling the drug dealer first. And I was talking with somebody about this recently, too. And I know we talk about the physical dependence and we talk about the withdrawal and how to get through that, but I think that grip actually plays a much larger psychological role than we think, where once you get in that trap, it's not just about getting through the physical symptoms, it's about the psychological hold, as we know. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a while to get out of the forest to see the trees.
Exactly.
It's, you don't realize that. It's once the withdrawal and all that's done, it just, your mind takes over and your mind's a terrible place to be alone. And,
absolutely.
Without help or without a program or a sponsor or anything. Do you still go to AA or do you
No, so that was
any...
like the thing about my story is I had attended a ton of meetings, and because my social anxiety was so debilitating, there was literally no way that I could raise my hand and make use of what that room could give me at that time. I wasn't ready to receive it. I was not in a place to integrate that information. I had to figure out a different way. Did I want to be on another opioid like a methadone, Suboxone? No, because I had already tried that route. It hadn't worked for me. I had abused opioids while still being on those medications, and I needed to do something different. So I needed to force myself behaviorally out of the daily routine of using and then put in the work that I thought it was going to take in order to sustain this. So I got on the Vivitrol, and I gave myself no deadline because there was no risk of withdrawal. I just said, let's just stay on this as long as it works, and let's stay on it at least a year, which is what I recommend everybody do. Let the brain heal without having the opioids in those neural pathways, and let's just see what happens here. So I really couldn't make use of the meetings, and that was a big part of telling my story too, because I also want people to know that if that's not what you can make use of, there is another way, and you can make it work for you, but it all has to come from the healthy voice, and it all has to be something that you deliberate on and you have all the support around. And I was grateful I have my parents and a lot of great other people. So stayed on Vivitrol for 3.5 years, but it wasn't just let's just take a medication because I'm not willing to do anything else. It was weekly therapy sessions. It was getting to the root of the problem. It was now uncovering trauma, which took years to even get to in therapy. And now I have an amazing therapist who's a Jungian psychologist, who's a consciousness expert. I've now mastered this practice of heart centering and meditation, which has played such a significant role in being able to shift my energy the way that I feel like I need to in order to engage different situations. So that's the benefit of that medication for me, and that's why I think it's so important to also talk about it in a correctional setting, because it's also sort of a captive population if the folks aren't using in there.
Correct.
To be able to make use of that and get it in their system before they get out to the street.
Yes, and can you just back up a little bit? Talk a little bit about the meditation part, because you know, the physical, psychological, emotional addiction is very, very you're ingrained in it. You can't help it. The ritual of getting it, having it, not having enough. You could have a pound of it. I could have a pound of whatever I was doing back in the day, but I was still worried about 2 weeks from now when that pound was gone. You know what I mean? That obsessive, compulsive,
Absolutely.
always thinking. So a little bit about the meditation, because I think we all overlook how much damage we've done to our psyche and our mind, and the ability to actually reach inside for the help we want. You know?
Absolutely. And I would say even before the addiction starts, the meditation addresses all of that stuff. So there's so many different types of meditation. For me specifically, heart-centering meditation is really about having self-compassion, and it's really about having compassion for the people around us. And so it's really, if you think about it, and anyone that knows anything about consciousness work, it's really about sort of healing the inner child. And so I've tried to explain this. I think I'm going to do it okay now, because I think I've explained it enough times as to what I actually do in this meditation. But basically what it is I will sort of keep an inventory of the things throughout the week that have caused a strong emotional reaction in me that I'm sort of like dealing with, and second guessing and ruminating and the racing thoughts, which is sort of like, you know, my go-to. And what I do is I sit in the meditation, I sort of have the image in front of me of whatever is bringing up that physiological discomfort. I sit with it, with the image. It might be me at 7 years old saying something to somebody and not getting my needs met in that moment. And then I drop into the heart center where my voice shifts, just like it did right now. I sort of drop in, and now I'm envisioning sort of this ray of electricity, vibration, passing through my heart and the heart of me as whatever age I was who needed that hug and needed that healing. And so what it really ends up happening is I start to look at the things that I react to, the things that hook me in life. When someone says something to me or treats me a certain way, what is that about? And so when we do this ego work about how to surrender the ego, because the ego is what actually gets us in trouble, you sort of dissolve it, and then you come to that place of that non-duality, which is that Buddhist philosophy of knowing both extremes, and then sort of finding your place in the middle where you're centered, and you're not pulled to either extreme. So you're letting the things that once hooked you and got a strong emotional reaction out of you, now it's flowing through. And now you're in line, the energy is in line with your highest self, which is the utmost potential that you can reach, and that has been transformative work for me.
Wow. Well, that's like who's explaining it, where you look at your trauma, or you look at whatever that fear is. A woman in Minnesota, it was on eating disorders and other behavioral health. She said that she, instead of worrying about that fear or whatever that thing is, you process through it. You go right through the whole scenario, whatever that scenario may be, and then you're on the other side of it. You're not still stuck in it. And she explained that it gets kind of crazy sometimes, and you get, you kind of kind of have to work through it. But once you're through it, it's in the past. Is that kind of what you? Is that kind of what you do?
And through the eating disorder work that I've done, that's where I picked up that line of like, you move through it, not around it, to make it happen. And so, absolutely, I think you bring up a really good point. It's all about the fear. You always have to peel back, and it takes me still some time to figure out, okay, what's the fear? The fear is not having value to somebody. The fear is being alone. Whatever the fear is, you have to identify it. You have to peel back all the layers, and then that's what you said. That's the core emotion that gets us into trouble. What are you running from? What is the fear? What are you afraid of? You have to sit with that fear so you're not manifesting those situations that then hook onto that fear.
Right. Running from and running to as well, you know. As you were speaking, I remember being in Salem State in my first year of social work and listening about Anna Freud and Sigmund Freud and the inner id and everything, and I just glossed over that. It was interesting. I mean, it really tweaked me, but I didn't really, I was too busy trying to keep up with everybody. I didn't come from that background, but I really enjoyed learning. But I have a daughter who's into meditation and into healthy eating. She's a vegan and everything, and she's great. I mean, she's really like kind of my go-to person now. I just sent her a picture of your bumper sticker.
Awesome, I love it.
Yeah, and no, but I really, because I know her mind is sharp. I know that she does this every day. I only wish she was around 33 years ago. Because I really believe that we're all capable of getting the help we need. We're always looking. I know people for me anyway, AA, old school. What Eddie just said a while ago. It is old school for me because those people figured it out from two drunks. A doctor and a stock exchange guy that, put this remarkable program together and trial and error. And all of a sudden, millions of people, almost a century later, benefit from it. And it's amazing. But there's a lot of inner stuff that we don't even realize that's there. That's what we're fighting against, but we don't even know it.
Exactly.
And we're running on fear. What's the acronym for it? Face everything and recover, or fuck everything and run. You decide on what you want to do, and there are times when I'm stuck in that fear and I can't get out of it, and even taking that kind of that philosophy and just going through it and just getting in your past. Like, I've been divorced 2 times, and when I was in the divorces, I was like, this is the end of my life. I can't fucking remember even my ex-wives' names, let alone remembering what all that fear was about. So that's something that we have to kind of push through. And it's not easy, though. It's not easy to push through it, because it's you have to look at, number one, yourself and what's causing that fear, and why do you need to push through this and get to the other side. And number 2, you might have to take some action on it too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the scary part for people is like, and this is sort of what I represent to a lot of people in my life these days, and I sort of have to be mindful of like what I provoke in people now. Now that they know the work that I do, because it's like I'm seeing patterns, I'm seeing behaviors, I'm putting it all together, and I can't help but sort of conceptualize the person that's in front of me, whether that be a client, patient, friend, family member. I sort of like have a read on you and what it is that you probably should do to help yourself. I'm not going to tell you that that's what you need to do, but if you think I know that, then there's some pressure there of like, now you're going to act. So I think people have this reaction to me now where they're like, you can see inside my soul. You know what I'm thinking. Yes, and there's no judgment, though. It's not my life. It's yours.
Well, that's
I can give you the information. You can do whatever you want with it.
Most of my family doesn't even want me around because of that. Like, stop looking into me. I'm like, I can't help it.
So that's my dad. Now, my dad, the conversation will start, and he'll start looking at me and be like, I don't like where this is going.
I'm vulnerable around you. You can see into me.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but some people you get around that. Some people get around. You can kind of sense that.
Yeah.
But I notice it's me and not you, Sweets, but me and
I
not
noticed you were looking right at me.
Yeah, I know.
It's weird.
Well,
I think the important thing too is like, and I think a lot of us in recovery can make this happen and sort of have and rely on this as the tool in the back pocket is like, no matter what happens, it all comes down to perspective. If you can see a situation that you can look at and say, okay, well, that was devastating. It could have been a lot more devastating if I had let it victimize me. Mm-hmm. But if I look at it as a way to sort of put some more tools together and accept this as a lesson, it's meant to be here. I've brought it into my orbit for a reason. It is something I need to work through. That's way more powerful than feeling victimized by something because this happened, or, you lost your job, or whatever the case is. And so I think this is sort of tying it back into my philosophy of psychology and this consciousness work that I do. I think the reason why that's so powerful, and the reason why I've been able in some really tough situations to shift perspective, to make it work for me and to have it be a benefit, is because I see the problems that I see in other people are actually just an extension of me.
Exactly.
It's not them and me. That is me.
Yeah.
That's why they're here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the universe's way of showing me this is some work left to be done.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the work or not? It's up to you. You can live stuck in this rut, or you can try to break through.
And Mike, you say that, or Podfather, you say that all the time about, when you're sitting in front of a client and, you can see yourself in them.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
was just
countless
thinking-
of times, how
Yeah.
many you say that on
Yeah,
the
I was
show.
just thinking that, and what I really get out of like sitting with somebody, especially with an addiction, that's most of the work I do, is that is I know what they're thinking, and I know what they're going to say, and I know some of the solutions that worked for me, but I can't just dump it on them and expect them, because they think I'm judging them, or they're not ready for that yet, But I just find it such a rewarding career to be able to help somebody, and there's not a lot of success in this type of business. You don't get, if there's 10 addicts coming to see you, you're not getting 9 of them well. You might get 2 of them well if you're lucky. But when I do have a success story, and I have a few of them that I'm very, very happy, but I look at their success and how they got there, and a lot of them just worked really hard. They wanted it. They were ready to go to any means, as it says in the big book and all the stuff, the literature that we're entitled to read because we're in the program. They wanted it. They wanted to go to any means to get it. So then they're willing to try medication, go to meetings, ask for help, beg, get on their knees, pray, whatever. And to me, that's the person that's going to get well. And years, how quickly time goes by. Years later, I see some people that are doing so well. They might even forgot they come to see me, but I know that they're doing well because early intervention, we got help, we went to meetings, I don't know. It's a rewarding career that way.
Yeah, very powerful. It's powerful work. I mean, the stuff that manifests in session when I'm working with clients, especially when they're ready to do this work and they have a history of addiction, is just incredible. In fact, I actually just got a message recently from an old colleague of mine, of a patient of mine who returned to the hospital and was looking for me, and it was just, to hear what he had to say about the work that we had done together was got me right in the heart, man. It was crazy. It really was.
And I think this stems back to what we were saying before, is that recovery has different faces now.
Yeah.
Meditation and all that. I mean, we always did that in recovery, but the way we're doing it now, some of the techniques, Vivitrol, we do that at Genesis House. Vivitrol is huge for us. It's a wonderful, wonderful drug, as you can attest to. And, we kind of encourage the Vivitrol down at Genesis House. But, 5 years, 10 years ago, if we were talking like this, we'd be, if we had a podcast 10 years ago, we would be on the black market of podcasts.
Right.
This is how you do it.
Right.
Go to meetings, don't drink, get a sponsor, get a home group, stay sober.
And you know what I find too is like the older you get, and I've been sober a long time, decades. So I'm very fortunate, but I still learn. My youngest daughter tells me, "You eat too fast, Dad. You don't even enjoy your food. You eat like the house is on fire." And I'm like, 35 years as a cop, 28 working the street. You didn't have a lunch hour, so you would wolf down anything you could get your hands on just to have some substance and then get back out there. My breathing, I never ever did any breathing exercises, and now it's like the best tool I have. Driving here, wherever I'm going, I not getting mad, not pounding the steering wheel, acting like a complete nut, because she's taught me these things, and it's so good to have children. And for me anyway, when people come to me and they say, "I met your son, I met one of your daughters," or whatever, it's such a good feeling to hear that, because I know that. If there's one thing I've done in life, I raised some really good kids, and in spite of my problems along the way with addiction and everything, I was very fortunate. But now to learn from them, because, like I said, just for the last year or so, I've been doing these breathing exercises. Incredible. It's helped me so much. I wish I had known about them years ago.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, too, on your show, Maegan, the Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was that was my favorite show out of everything, because I'm an exercise fanatic, and Jeff Zazelle, who him and I run a lot with.
Our mentor?
Our
Jeff
mentor,
Zazelle?
yeah.
That's
He'll be on this show soon.
He will?
Yeah, he will.
I'm
Yeah,
excited.
he might be making a guest appearance. But that was a wonderful show. That her whole thing was amazing.
Yep.
That it's all based on whatever recovery.
Yep.
You didn't have to qualify AA or NA to go to the Phoenix, and it's basically like a gym or a wellness center, right?
Yeah, it's actually, I was actually just down there. I checked out their new facility.
Oh,
a
you
couple
finally
weeks
looked
ago.
at it?
Yeah, I went. I finally went. I told them, I was like, oh my god, this has been like years in the making. But yeah, they do CrossFit and yoga, and they have groups, and you have to identify as just being off of substances for 48 hours, and you're there to get help, and people can go with supports, and it's just a great community. It's free. It's in an area
amazing.
of Boston right around the corner from Mass Ave that is just so needed, and people down there are taking advantage of that place. It's not like people aren't going. They have vans coming in from the detoxes, the local detoxes, and I know people personally who are in my life whose lives have completely transformed because they got started with the Phoenix. So yeah,
Mind, body, and soul.
Exactly.
That's
I mean,
what it's about.
recovery. I mean, if I didn't run in recovery, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today. That was a huge part of my recovery.
Yep.
Not just we all have to put our own recovery together and figure it out. And like you said earlier, this way might keep you sober. That way is going to keep me drunk. You know what I mean, or using or whatever. But if it wasn't for my running, and every time I listen to a new podcast, I always look for fitness and recovery, and that was the name of your episode, and I immediately went to it. And it's amazing out there. Yoga now, they have yoga classes that are sober yoga classes. There's alcohol-free bars now. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. There's I forgot what they call them, but
Sober bars.
Sober bars.
Yeah.
It's a different world in recovery now, and we need this. We need more of this positive thinking and this innovative thinking. How to be happy without using.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve just passed not too long ago. I when I got into recovery, I was it was March 4th. My birthday, March 14th. What the hell is my sobriety date? Whatever it is, March. It was March when March,
25 years ago.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
Took you that whole month to get sober.
Good Lord. I'm getting old. But the first thing I asked my therapist in March in rehab was, well, what the fuck am I going to do for New Year's now? And he said, "Whoa, slow down, dude. It's not even fucking March. It's not even end of March yet." And so that's that mentality that we have. But now, I spent it with my sister this last New Year's. It was quiet, low key. My brother-in-law and my wife, we were all just kind of just quiet night, and it's a different world, and we have to let you guys out there listening that it's okay not to do anything, not to be 20, like we were talking during the break. 21. Oh, I'm gonna go out and get fucked up when I'm 21. Yeah. It's okay not to get fucked up when you're 21. Stay sober. Stay. Whatever it is. So.
I think the cool thing about it too now, and like I say cool, take that with a grain of salt, because it's obviously not cool to have an addiction and be struggling with that. I think the cool part about recovery and the recovery landscape right now is that it is fucking cool to be sober.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
like,
absolutely.
It is badass.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, this is a community that I want to be a part of.
Right. Right.
People are drinking just to be part of us.
Right.
Seriously.
And years ago, it wasn't. I mean, you'd go to these halls. I mean, I sober when I was 32 years old, which isn't young, but I mean, at the time, I felt young. But the halls were full of, people smoking cigarettes and just hacking and coughing. And, I'm like, Jesus, I don't know. These are going to be my new friends.
Yeah.
But now, 32, 33 years later, you go in, and you're right. And there's so many options. Yeah. Hey, this has been a great show.
Absolutely. Thank you
guys. This has been
Thank
great.
you, Maegan.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
Maegan
this.
Kenney.
Maegan Kenney.
What's the name of the podcast again, Ed?
The Addictionary Podcast, and stay tuned. I got a research project that I'm going to be
wonderful.
talking
Oh, yeah,
about.
we did not talk about
That's all right.
that.
I don't really think I am allowed to give specifics yet.
Okay,
So just
okay.
stay tuned. Follow
So,
us on
yep.
Instagram at the Addictionary Podcast.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Good, thank you.
Thank
And-
you,
and
guys. It's
maybe
been great.
We got to get your dad on here.
Absolutely. As soon as
as
Dad's back is recovered, he's going to be up here.
Hey, Bob. How you
Hey,
doing?
Bob. Hey, BK.
You don't
What's up,
know
buddy?
me, but I love your show, Bob.
Friends of Recovery Podcast, everybody. Keep listening.
Stay sober.
Yeah, that's what I
Is that what you want me to say?
That's what I
Stay
wanted
sober,
you to say.
everybody.
That concludes this episode of Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House for supporting those on the path to recovery and for keeping this valuable resource free for our Friends in Recovery community. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, email us at help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com. If you can't get enough of Mike the Podfather and Jersey Ed, you can catch them on Answering the Call, the First Responder Podcast, available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube.